we have achieved a quorum, so thank all of you. So I'd ask that everyone please take a seat as quickly as possible, and we'll begin in a moment.
I think you got plenty of seats to choose from. You could lay across a whole row. It's like when the airplane's empty.
I know. Well, those are all friends and
it's a red
neighbors.
eye.
And
Yeah, exactly.
it's friends and neighbors, you know. Yellow. Tonight is yellow. Okay. Please speak directly into the microphone. I see. Okay.
Yeah, it does. How are you?
I am very well, thank you. I'm hoping it is the last night.
Yeah, I know. 4 nights.
Yes, the Strand. Do you have it?
Okay, let us begin. I hereby call to order the continuation of the Town of Carlisle Annual Town Meeting for 2019. Good evening. I'm still Wayne Davis. I'm still your moderator. Thank you very, very, very much for coming and supplying a quorum on this, what appears to be historic third night. And also, I would note that of the continuation nights that I've had the privilege of serving as your moderator, this is the earliest that we've gotten a quorum. So thanks to all of you for coming out. It is very much appreciated. As this is a continuation of last night's proceedings, I'm going to cut out 98% of the usual preliminaries. But in honor of our new fire marshal, our new fire chief, and in recognition of his illustrious predecessors, I will remind everyone that we have our fire exits down front here and in the back. If we need to evacuate the room for any reason, I will adjourn the meeting until sometime in the future. And we will have to announce when. Let me. I should probably be more clear than that. The town meeting technically actually continues next Tuesday at the polls. So I would, since the school is not available tomorrow evening, I will simply adjourn to the election, and then we'll have to figure out when we continue thereafter. I simply don't know. But that would only be in the case of an emergency evacuation, because I'm sure you will all cooperate with me tonight, and we will get through this entire warrant and finish in due time. And just to make sure that we do, I put on my lucky third night tie, and we've got all the help that we need. Before we proceed, I got a lot of interesting feedback in the last 24 hours. A number of you expressed concern about my stamina, standing up here all the time and never sitting down. Thank you, I appreciate the concern, but don't worry about me. I actually prefer standing. I've not had a chair in my office for the last 6 or 7 years. I prefer to stand, so I'm okay. But most of the feedback actually was not about that. There was a lot of concern about civility in some of the debate that we had last night. Now, I did have to rap the gavel at one point and say no applause, and I would repeat that. It is very important, because look, if you don't applaud after someone speaks, what does that mean? You thought that the person's remarks were chopped liver? It's just not appropriate. We don't need to do that, neither applause nor booing, but more fundamentally, people were concerned that some of the remarks that some people said last night crossed the line of civility. Now, I'll tell you my personal judgment, and though I haven't gone back and looked at the tape, my own sense was I didn't feel like anyone crossed the line, but a number of people on a number of occasions came awfully close to where I would have drawn the line. Now, people may differ as to where the line of civility is. Okay, and when I go back and look at the tape, maybe I'll conclude that I judged incorrectly and that I should have said, no, that you've crossed a line. But the point is that the responsibility for civility in the first case lies not with me, but with each of you. And, you know, I encourage you to regulate yourselves as we generally do pretty well in this town. Certainly, from what I hear in other towns, we actually do better than many other towns. So, thank you for that. But it is up to you in the first instance. And also, the important thing to recognize is that at the end of the day, the costs of incivility, in part, are borne by those who are uncivil. This is a pretty smart crowd here. And it's been my experience here in Carlisle that when people make arguments that are overly personal, not substantiated by reasonable evidence, not logical, more emotional, that the voters tend to see that. And those arguments usually don't do very well in carrying the day. So on rather pragmatic terms, it's not a good thing to do, leaving aside any moral terms. But I hope we'll all regulate ourselves pretty well. And if need be, then I will ask people to tone it down. But I hope we won't have to get there tonight. Okay, with that, we are ready to proceed. And we will pick things up at Article 26. I'm sorry. 28. Okay, yeah, let's not do any more than we need to.
Especially not those.
Okay. So for Article 28, I recognize Dr. Lewis.
I move that the town vote to accept the provision of Chapter 140, Section 139 of the Massachusetts General Laws to permit the town to waive dog license fees for residents over the age of 70.
Second.
Thank you. It's been made and seconded. Please speak to the article.
This is a very low-cost item for the town. We don't have a lot of people who do it. It's considered to be it's done in a lot of other towns, and we thought when it was suggested, it was an excellent idea while it's a minor way to acknowledge the financial concerns of people over the age of 70. It's something that we can do, and it has little bearing on our finances.
Okay, thank you. The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to support Article 28. Any other boards or committees with a recommendation? Okay, seeing none, is there any debate or questions on this article? Okay, let's vote. All those in favor of Article 28, no dog license fee for residents over age 70, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. On to Article 29. I recognize Mr. Ascolillo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that the town vote to amend the general bylaws by adding the following streets and roads to the list of scenic roads provided in Section 12.1: Rockland Road and Stern Street.
Second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. I recognize Mr. Rolfe to speak to the article.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Rolfe, Planning Board, presenting and speaking to this article. Okay, for those that are unfamiliar with the scenic road designation process, for a road to be considered for designation as a scenic road, it should have a set of features of aesthetic, conservation, or historic value. This can include trees and often does include trees and stone walls. These features can provide other benefits as noted here, such as protecting natural resources, and a loss of these features can have an overall detrimental effect on the scenic and aesthetic value of the road. So the purpose of the scenic road bylaw is it's just exactly that. It's to protect the features that make a scenic road scenic. Any questions on that?
Yeah, the question is.
All right, so how is that protection achieved? The planning board and the tree warden, as necessary, must provide their consent to changes that might occur within the right-of-way of a designated scenic road. Those changes may occur, for example, when a subdivision goes in and there needs to be a road cut or something along that lines. Changes can include, as I mentioned, cutting of trees or even changes to the stone wall. What's not affected, what's not affected? What is affected? What's not affected? Sorry, the slides are out of order. What's not affected is private property adjacent to a designated scenic road, okay? So as long as what you're doing is not regulated, then you're free to go ahead and do that. Hey, Kevin. It's important to note that. Okay. We had pictures, let's deal with this slide that's out of order. Where is Rockland? It's there just outside of Town Hall, top arrow, and Stern Street just opposite Blood Farm down on off of 225. So here we have pictures of Rockland, and what you can see is it's got a nice natural country rural aesthetic feel to it. Stern Street, similar. We've got some slide pictures here for Stearns and another set of pictures there. What's interesting to note about Stern Street is that it's the only ancient road appearing on an 1831 map of Carlisle that is not already designated a scenic road. So Stearns is a long time overdue. As far as what we have for scenic roads currently, here's the list. And the planning board is asking your support tonight on Article 29 so that we could add Stearns and Rockland to this list. Thank you. Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, and if we could have the lights back up on the stage, I'd appreciate it. Okay, the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to support Article 28. I presume, I'm sorry, we're on Article 29, I'm looking at the wrong one, as well as the Planning Board voting unanimously. Any other boards or commissions, committees? Okay, any discussion? All right, I think we can just proceed. I'm sorry, Ms. Hurley.
Yes, Kay Hurley, School Street. I'm wondering, does this give us any protection from Eversource? And Eversource...
Could you get a little closer to the mic,
sorry,
please?
is that better?
Yes, thank you.
I'm wondering if this gives us any protection against Eversource, who seems to be a tad aggressive on deciding which trees they think ought to come down.
Could you address that?
So, any changes along a scenic road, okay, would have to come back to the planning board, or with trees, it would involve the tree warden as well. And it is my understanding, and I'm looking at our administrator for confirmation, that that would apply to Eversource as well as private individuals.
Any more questions or any debate? Okay, let's proceed to a vote then. So we're voting on the designation of Stern Street and Rockland Road as scenic roads. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously, and I so declare. On to Article 30. And is Mr. McMorrow here this evening? Okay, I'll recognize Ms. Smack to make the motion.
Good evening. I'm Amy Smack, 114 Red Pine Drive. I make the motion to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate up to $20,000 to be expended by the Board of Selectmen for an architectural and engineering study of Spalding Field for the purpose of planning future recreational use by the school and the town. The study would conduct soil cores and test pits to test issues related to drainage, architect an undersurface drainage system, assess the risk of finding hazardous materials left from prior use of the site, scope any needs for variances or other permitting issues related to new field construction, make recommendations related to field configuration, solar orientation, use, and maintenance plans, make recommendations for tree and foliage setbacks for solar coverage, recommend variations of grass, clay, or other materials, and assess the suitability of the site or some portion thereof for artificial turf or to take any action related thereto.
I think you didn't want to say or to take any action related thereto. Okay, that's not appropriate as part of the motion. That was in the warrant.
Okay.
All right? Could we have a second for that? Okay, thank you. And if we could get the lights on the stage down, I'd appreciate some help on that. Okay, Ms. Mack, you have 8 minutes. Please proceed.
So the current issues that we have at Spalding have to do with sinkholes. On the playing fields, we have large sinkholes that develop as a result of poor subsurface material. These sinkholes indicate problems with hydrology, drainage, and grading on the fields. We have issues with the surface water. Rainwater does not drain properly in the southeast corner of the field, causing game and practice cancellations when the fields are unplayable due to being underwater. Sun coverage. Forest overgrowth has led to issues with sun coverage and damage to the grass. Animal waste. We continue to have issues with waterfowl living in the adjacent wetlands and their inevitable byproducts left on the field. Interactions with wetlands. The wetlands border the field and cannot be changed. We need better solutions for managing the use of the fields given the proximity to the wetlands. Part of the scope of the field study is to review the survey data to understand where the wetlands begin. Configuration. Spalding is a multi-use field for school phys ed classes and sports such as soccer, field hockey, baseball, and softball. Configuration issues have become safety issues with the baseball and softball diamonds in proximity to hazards like other fields in use and small children at play in the Diamond Park playground. Solar orientation. In its present state, the field is configured so that the sun is often in the batter's eyes at home plate during the times when the field is in use. A field study will help us better plan to reduce these kinds of ongoing issues. Degradation of the hardscape. We currently have rusted backstops, benches, and batting cages. And limited use. As a result of these issues, we are facing limited use for Spalding Field, a place that should be a town asset. These are illustrations of the sinkholes that appear in the field. The scope of the engineering study would dig test pits and soil cores to identify subsurface issues. It would provide a fully engineered design for a drainage system. It would make recommendations about best configuration and renovation plans. It would help us to identify permitting issues, especially vis-a-vis nearby wetlands. It would recommend materials. It would recommend tree and foliage setbacks. And it would advise us on the feasibility of artificial turf at the site. Why is this needed? Spalding Field is an important recreational and educational town asset. Leaving it in its current condition is not a smart use of our limited town lands. Without this preliminary work, we cannot confidently make proposals about the future use and renovation of Spalding Field. With this funding, we will be able to make renovation proposals that optimize its potential and with good information about the potential costs. I will entertain your questions now.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendations that we had here, the Recreation Commission voted unanimously to support this article, as did the Selectmen and the FinCom. Did we have recommendations from any other boards or committees? Okay, the floor is open for discussion on this article. At microphone 1, that is 1, right?
Lori Cameron, 100 Bellows Hill Road. I also am the president of Concord Carlisle Youth Soccer, which is one of the youth sports organizations that would like to use Spalding Field, but is currently unable to in its current state. And the pictures you saw up there of the sinkholes, those were probably earlier this spring. Last week when I went out to check the fields on Saturday morning for use because of the rain, the fields were not usable, and actually there were new sinkholes, and one of them was 2 feet deep, which was probably large enough to swallow a pre-K child. It was quite remarkable. Actually, if you drive by Spalding Field, you'll see that I coned it off and put caution tape around it, because I was afraid that someone, even a dog walker, could be walking across the field and not see the hole and fall into the hole. So in my opinion, and I think Concord Carlisle Youth Soccer's opinion, this study is needed. We need to repair the fields. Without this, they just continue to degrade, and they're not really usable for the sports teams, the youth sports teams, or the school sports teams, or the PE programs. So I support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone 5, please.
Henry Hedden, 98 East Riding Drive. I don't oppose the study, although I do oppose using artificial turf for the field. I've played sports in artificial turf before. In my experience, well, my main concern is that outdoor artificial turf fields tend to get uncomfortably hot because they absorb a lot more sunlight than natural turf. And they also tend to be very rough and uncomfortable to land on, as often occurs in some rough sports. So although I'm sure there are some improvements that can be made, I hope that replacing the grass with artificial turf is not one of those.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, I think we're ready to take a vote. So, Article 30, this is $20,000 funding for Spalding Field study. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. Article 31 was listed on the warrant. I recognize Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move that town meeting take no action on Article 31.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let me explain what we're doing here. The warrant, as I explained the first night, is the agenda, and the selectmen typically close that 3 to 5 weeks ahead of town meeting. Sometimes things happen that lead an agenda item basically to be pulled from, and no motion to be made. Usually we just I make note of that and we pass by. Since this was a capital project and debt exclusion, we wanted to more formally record what the meeting is doing. So the no action merely records a vote saying that the town meeting took up the agenda item and decided to do nothing with it. So that's the vote we're taking now. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously, and I so declare. Article 32, is the vote to dissolve the Carlisle Housing Authority. I recognize Ms. Reed.
I move that town vote dissolve the Carlisle Housing Authority in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 121B, Section 3.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. I recognize Mr. Friedman to make the presentation on Article 32.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm David Friedman, Chair of the Carlisle Housing Authority. This article is to get town meeting approval of the dissolution of the Housing Authority, on which I serve, along with two other members, George Payne, a Benfield resident, and Beverly Shorey, both of whom expressed interest to the selectmen in addressing affordable housing issues in town. The three of us were appointed to fill the positions of former members who resigned en masse last September. First, to be clear about the entity we are proposing be dissolved, the Carlisle Housing Authority. Approved by town meeting a little over 30 years ago, essentially the affordable housing entity in town until 2006, when the Housing Trust was formed. Prior to the formation of the trust, for a period in the 80s and 90s, there was a private nonprofit funding group formed called Carlisle Affordable Housing, Inc. It worked on the Conant Land and Town Forest initiatives, but after they didn't progress, the funding entity disbanded in 2002. The trust was formed in 2006 in the midst of the Benfield planning and development process and coordinated with the Housing Authority on it. In 2012, the trust initiated the group home project and deputized the Housing Authority to develop the RFP and select a developer and eventually to hold and execute the lease with the selected developer. The Housing Authority does not manage either the Benfield Farms or group home housing projects. The main purpose of local housing authorities in the Commonwealth is to own and operate developments and units and to provide their tenants with safe, sanitary, and affordable housing. The vast majority of LHAs, and by this I mean like 95% of them, have these responsibilities. Ours does not. In 2005, the state legislature passed the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Fund law that simplified the process of establishing a local housing trust. Previously, towns needed to gain approval from the legislature through a home rule petition. The law also set guidelines on what local housing trusts can do and specifies who can serve on a local housing trust board and what powers a community can grant the board. The Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust currently has 7 members, consisting of the 5 selectmen, plus a Benfield resident, and a member of the planning board who also happens to be on the master plan steering committee. Per statute, and as established in Carlisle, and as confirmed with town council, the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust has all the power and authority to do anything and everything necessary to investigate, plan, build support for, develop, fund, and even manage affordable housing projects. This warrant article references Mass General Law 121B, Section 3, which provides for the creation and dissolution of a housing authority. The 3 members of the Carlisle Housing Authority have made the first determination. We have concluded that there is no need for a housing authority in Carlisle, since we have a housing trust that can do everything a housing authority can do, and more. We see no benefit to the town of having 2 separate entities with similar and overlapping responsibilities. I don't believe Carlisle deals with any other area of government responsibility with 2 entities. So, as required by the statute, we have formally transferred all of the Housing Authority's legal obligations to the trust. We coordinated these transfers with the lessees of Benfield Farms and the group home. The necessary documents were drafted and have all been executed and recorded as necessary. So, in terms of requirement number 2, the Housing Authority has no property to administer, and all its outstanding obligations have been satisfied. Remember, we, and by we I mean the town of Carlisle, do not own or manage any affordable housing units. Significant time has been spent over the past several years trying to resolve differences over approach and overlapping responsibilities. This is our opportunity to put this all behind us and to move ahead as a community with a clean slate and in a positive, respectful manner. This is the ideal time to resolve this as we embark on a major planning initiative with the master planning process. So in accordance with the statute, we ask for your vote in favor of the dissolution of the Carlisle Housing Authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. Okay, and if we could have the lights up on the stage, I'd appreciate it. The planning board voted unanimously to support Article 32, as well as the Board of Selectmen. I assume the Housing Authority itself voted to recommend this? Yes, thank you. And did the Housing Trust take a vote? No? Okay, that's fine. Did any other boards? I'm sorry?
We didn't have a meeting.
Did not have a meeting. Okay. Did any other boards, committees, or authorities take a vote? Okay, good. Well, with that, the floor is open for discussion on this article. At microphone 5, Mr. Levitan.
Mark Levitan, 105 Wolf Rock Road. The state law is clear. A housing authority can divest its assets and obligations and decide it's no longer needed. Text of the law states whenever a housing authority determines there's no need for its existence, it may submit the question to town meeting. However, we as the voters have the final say. Town meeting authorizes the creation of the authority, and only town meeting can dissolve it. Then the State Department of Housing and Community Development has to give its blessing. And I don't mean this as a threatening thing at all, but they are aware of circumstances here. And I disagree that we no longer need a housing authority. I was the chair of the housing authority when all members resigned last September. This is a group of strong, dedicated, and accomplished volunteers: Steve Perlman, Carolyn Ing, Morgan Burse, and Alan Lahotsky, before he moved. Nobody quit because they didn't or don't care, nor did anyone think that there was no need for the Carlisle Housing Authority's existence. Our reasons for leaving were well documented, substantive, and still remain unresolved. Our intent was to shine a bright light on the complete lack of action on affordable housing by the Board of Selectmen, whose 5 members constitute 5/7 of the trust over the last 4+ years. With the now available justification of a master plan project and the long duration of planning, fundraising, and execution of affordable housing projects, I estimate that the gap between our last project, the Bedford Road Group Home, and our next significant development will be no less than 8 to 10 years and probably more. This is not good. We all know the situation. We keep hearing that we need housing diversity, that the senior population is exploding, and there are few, if any, opportunities for young families to come into town. Currently have 40 age and income restricted apartments in town between Benfield Farms that opened in 2014 and Village Court that opened in 1987. Both are privately owned, but made possible by Carlisle government action. We have yet to develop our first unit of housing for working families. This represents a huge squander of time. And so I think it is legitimate to ask the Board of Selectmen about their intent going forward and why they think it's a good idea to replace elected officials with ones they appoint. Elected Carlisle Housing Authority members answer to the public and are almost certain to support the mission of increasing affordable housing while preserving the semi-rural character of the town. How can we be certain that the Board of Selectmen will appoint trust members who truly believe in affordable housing as defined by state law and will do the heavy lifting? What's the role of the Affordable Housing Trust? Its legal name is indeed the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It was authorized by town meeting in May 2006 to augment...
Excuse me, you're at 3 minutes, so please try to wrap up very quickly.
I will be very happy to do that. It is limited to creation of housing for low and moderate income households those terms have specific meaning under state law, 80% of area median income or 100%. The trust fund has the power to raise and expend funds.
You finished your sentence. Please sit down, and we've got other people waiting. We'll give you another opportunity if there's time. Thank you. At microphone 2.
May I finish a sentence?
You finished your, you had several sentences after 3 minutes. Microphone 2, please.
Vanessa Maroney, 142 Bedford Road. So in full disclosure, I'll just let people know I have served before as chair of the Affordable Housing Trust and also chaired the committee for the 2015 Housing Production Plan. And obviously also because I was on the trust, I was also on the Board of Selectmen. While I recognize the appearance of redundancy or duplication of efforts between the Housing Authority and the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust, I am against this article and will be voting no. Voting to dissolve, the Housing Authority will eliminate the only elected board which is solely dedicated to housing needs. If the Housing Authority is dissolved, the responsibilities of those 5 Housing Authority commissioners, 4 of whom are elected for a 5-year term, and 1 of whom is appointed by the governor, will be handed over to the trust. The trust is currently structured to consist of all 5 members of the Board of Selectmen, plus 1 representative from the Housing Authority and 1 citizen at large. I believe that this vote is premature and reactive in nature. It wasn't that long ago that the Housing Authority resigned, and the trust really hasn't had that much time, relatively speaking, to figure out what to do as a result. This probably is due to the fact that 5 out of the 7 of them are members of the Board of Selectmen and are already overwhelmed with every single other issue here in town. And of course, now that there is no housing coordinator to help them, that's another concern for me as well. Let's give the trust a chance to show us how they will cover the bases before we take the legal action to dissolve the trust, which cannot be easily amended. Let's get some feedback from the master plan process about how we would structure our housing committee or committees going forward. I would ask people to remember that we are all just temporary guardians of the town at this small point in history, and this decision will last for years, likely. There is no reason to dissolve the Housing Authority until perhaps a satisfactory replacement exists. So within the parameters of the statute of the Affordable Housing Trust, Carlisle can customize the Board of Trustees' membership, terms, level of oversight, and powers. And given this ability to change the way the trust is structured, I have the following questions. What changes do you anticipate making to the trust if the Housing Authority is dissolved? Will you change the composition of the trust so that the majority does not lie with the 5 selectmen? And will you increase the membership of the trust and actively seek out members with a demonstrated interest in affordable housing? I can say with complete confidence that there is nothing in the 2015 Housing Production Plan about dissolving the Carlisle Housing Authority. Thank you. Please vote no.
Thank you. So Ms. Maroney asked a number of questions, which also I know Mr. Levitan asked several questions, some of which were rhetorical, which is fine. That's perfectly okay. But there was at least one factual question asked of the, I guess, of the trust and/or selectmen. I'm not sure which was directed to. But similar to Ms. Maroney, what are the intentions for the future of the trust? Does anyone wish to speak to that? Ms. Reed.
Kate Reed, Chair of the Carlisle Housing Affordable Trust. We currently have, in fact, invited one member who lives in the Benfield development, who is very interested in affordable housing. We have invited a member of the Planning Board who also is very interested in housing and who is as well a member of the Master Plan Steering Committee. We have not, as a body, yet discussed any reorganization of that body because we didn't know if we were going to still have a housing authority or not. I do want to point out that there's a lot of accountability on that body because 5 of the 7 members are elected and can be unelected if you don't like what they're doing.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 4, please.
John Ballantyne, 268 Fisk Street. First, I want to thank the Housing Authority members for service on that committee. Having been my first position back in 1986, I know that it can be difficult and contentious, and it is not easy. Second, I reluctantly support this article, and I want to express a concern which has already been echoed. My first volunteer job was working in the Housing Assessment Committee with Art Milliken, Woody Woodrick, Marty Galligan, and Chris Holly, and we came up looking at the overall housing issues in Carlisle. And what I want to talk about is housing issues, which has been narrowed down to affordability, because housing policy across the country and in particular in Massachusetts is a huge challenge, and we have not figured out a good way to do it. As you know, the 40B law that's passed, Mass General Law, is kind of a sledgehammer to trying to provide more housing. We need more housing, and when I talk about needing more housing, it's in the 200,000 to 600,000 range, not just under 200,000, which is the Mass General Law sort of affordabilities. And so one of the concerns that I have is as we look forward with the Housing Trust, and it's got a narrow sort of definition, is really how do you look at what do we do as our part in providing a greater mix of housing, some of which will be affordable and some of which will not be. And we have to figure out how to do that. Some of that may be zoning changes. And so how do you get the Housing Trust and a committee or a task force to look at these broader set of issues and come forward with proposals that address these? The Board of Selectmen are overworked. This is a very complicated policy issue, both within Carlisle, that's appropriate for Carlisle, and overall in Massachusetts. And this is not simple, and we have got to figure out how do we proactively do this, because Massachusetts and Eastern Massachusetts will not be livable if we don't have a broader mix of housing. So that's the concern I have.
Thank you. At microphone 5.
Josh Kablotsky, Nichols Lane. 5 of the 7 members of the Housing Trust are elected and accountable to the voters of this town. We have our challenges cut out for us as a town in many areas, including housing. To have 2 town boards working at cross purposes on the same project is not efficient and will not help us solve our problems any better. It will only create dysfunctional town government. I support this article.
Thank you. I'll recognize Ms. Huber at microphone 4, and then back to you, Mr. Levitan.
Ellen Huber, 15 Partridge Lane. And I feel badly about what's happened between these 2 organizations over the last year. But to me, it doesn't really make good sense to take an organization whose entire job is to cope with this and to replace it with an organization 5/7 of whom are members of our Board of Selectmen. The selectmen have much work to do on lots of other things. So I see if we want one organization only, I think we should stick with the Housing Authority. Also, the order of things here has been made it very difficult because it's almost as if this is a fait accompli. What are we to do at this point? Funds have been transferred, and it's not, I feel that all occurred without our input. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Levitan?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Every affordable housing development we have in town was enabled in some way by civic-minded landowners that encouraged us to use their properties, acquire their properties for one or more town purposes. The trust has a role in getting out ahead of that in a similar fashion to the Carlisle Conservation Foundation, even though the CCF is not a government entity. But the trust has the same power to engage and to go out and fundraise and to buy and sell properties for the purpose of accruing money for affordable housing. So this is why we had 2 entities. The Housing Authority was a more active branch, meeting twice monthly to the trust quarterly, developing concepts, educating the town, advocating for solutions such as inclusionary zoning, developing contacts in the development financial circles, and managing the execution of projects. The lack of directly owned buildings never defined the Carlisle Housing Authority, nor does its current lack of assets, to answer Ellen's question, prevent it from existing and performing needed functions. It will require an engaged Board of Selectmen in order to attract new volunteers. But I don't think you can legitimately say we don't need a housing authority and the functions that it was performing. To answer the other gentleman about duplication and being at cross purposes, from 2006 to 2015, that was not the case. And we developed some award-winning projects, and we brought people together, and we created homes for people who need them.
Thank you. Ms. Reed, did you have a further comment?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that the membership of the trust is not a requirement of the state, so it's not required that all 5 selectmen on the committee. What I was trying to say was that we had not yet considered reconstituting that group and looking into a different model because we didn't know what the outcome of this vote will be, and we didn't want to change it before we knew it was going to happen. But we have sort of on the side discussed that if this were to pass, that we would try to change the organization of the group. And so I just want to assure people that this is not set in stone, and we're thinking about not having all the selectmen on it.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 4, please.
Randy Brown, East Street.
Could you please get closer to the microphone? Thank you.
Randy Brown, East Street. Full disclosure, I was a member of the Housing Authority for about 3 years.
We still can't hear you. If you could get a little bit closer or raise it. Thank you.
Raise it? I'll stand on it. Is that good enough? Randy Brown, East Street. I was a member of the Housing Authority for a few years, and recently I was invited to attend a meeting of the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust last fall and was made aware of plans to form a subcommittee and take a look at the actual Housing Authority and what it was responsible for and what recommendations might be made. I just want to quote directly from the public record, which is the Board of Selectmen minutes, November 13th, 2018. In it, it says, on a motion by Kate Reed and seconded by Al Lewis, it was unanimously voted to establish an affordable housing subcommittee, which I believe Mr. Friedman is representing. He's not, I don't believe, officially representing the Carlisle Housing Authority. There was a second motion that said that by Kate Reed, seconded by Al Lewis, it was unanimously voted to appoint Carrie Kissinger from the trust, Nathan Brown from the Board of Selectmen, and Maureen Cosgrove Deary to serve as citizen at large on this 3-person subcommittee. Somehow, within a matter of a couple weeks, David Friedman had posted an agenda on the system, the town website, where he declared himself as the chair of the Carlisle Housing Authority, and the other 2 members mentioned here were not part of that group. There were 2 very quick meetings in January and February which the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust participated in, which is a little bit different than what I believe Kate Reed just said. More importantly, from let's say at least a housekeeping point of view, in the Declaration of Trust itself, there's the 3rd article talks about the tenure of trustees, and it says, excuse me, any trustee may resign by written instrument signed and acknowledged by such trustee and duly filed with the town clerk. I've got a request into the town clerk, and they're looking to see if there was any paperwork written and filed with them that takes care of the succession of trustees. If there isn't any succession of trustees, it brings into question all the decisions and meetings that that group has had over the past several months, perhaps past several years. So perhaps that's just a little bit of housekeeping, but if it's not, there's a fair amount of work to do to clean that up.
You're almost at 3 minutes,
and
Mr. Brown.
I would just remind everybody that I brought up before that the primary purpose of the trust is to go and get funds and the funds required to support any housing production plan are huge. They're in the 300 to 600,000 a year.
So please complete your thought.
That's my completed thought. Thank you.
Thank you. So I believe some question has been raised about the action of the Board of Selectmen in designating a committee or appointing replacement members of the authority. Someone from the Board of Selectmen wish to clarify?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Nathan Brown, Chair of the Board of Selectmen. I guess you know that it's written down there. Sorry, can you hear me now? So we did create a subcommittee to look into affordable housing options and what to do about the fact that all the members of the Housing Authority had resigned. We did meet. They were public meetings. And David Friedman is here and representing and sworn in as Housing Authority, not as a part of the subcommittee for determining how we deal with the Housing Authority having all resigned.
So just to be clear, there was at some point a subcommittee and a separate action different from the meeting quoted by Mr. Brown, at which the Housing Authority members were appointed. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there was a committee that made a recommendation. The Board of Selectmen then appointed the 3 members to the Housing Authority, and David became the chair of that newly appointed Housing Authority group of 3.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 2.
Kathy McDonald, Knoll Farm, that's where I live these days. I want to raise an example of what I saw about a month or so ago at the Select Board when the property on Stern Street came up for purchase, the opportunity to purchase it. And after much discussion and recommendations from most of the other boards in town, I believe, to support the purchase of that property because it was a very beautiful and opportune with many potential uses, the board decided not to support the purchase because there was not a plan that had come together or even the early stages of a view of a plan for that. And what the board talked about was that they would support such things if there was people coming together to create a plan for such an opportunity as that. And I think about that board and that meeting that took place close to midnight when that came up for discussion, that the board certainly doesn't have the capacity today to be taking up these kinds of opportunities and needs and the moral obligation that we have as a town to really take a proactive view to affordable housing. So I would ask the Select Board and the individual members about your intent to create a broader set of representation on this entity that is the trust that would take up these opportunities.
Are you asking us as, I'm sorry.
So yeah, I was about to say the question has been already asked and answered about the board as a board. They have not considered as a board. They may have individual opinions on it, which they can choose to express or not if they ask to be recognized. But it's not, they don't have a position as a board. I think Ms. Reed already indicated. Mr. Friedman?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to address some of the sort of questions and concerns that have been raised. First of all, to be clear, the trustees of the Affordable Housing Trust are bound by a declaration of trust with a clear directive and fiduciary responsibility to try and create affordable housing. They deserve our trust. The purpose of the trust, as stated in the Declaration of Trust, shall be to provide for the preservation and creation of affordable housing in the town of Carlisle. And if there's any doubt about the fact that this is something that the state expects trusts to do, this is the cover of a brochure put out by the Municipal Housing Partnership addressed to municipal affordable housing trusts with the subtitle, How to Envision, Gain Support, and Utilize a Local Trust to Achieve Your Housing Goals. There's another cover of a presentation.
Excuse me, David. If I could, we just get the lights dimmed on the stage so that people can see what you're showing. Sorry, we don't have the FinCom doing double duty.
There's
The
another.
FinCom is unsung heroes of Carlisle.
Here's another trusts as a tool for affordable housing, which included this: what can a trust do? Actively address affordable housing needs, support local control of housing initiatives, engage in real estate activity, make timely decisions related to housing, accumulate funds from a variety of sources. So this isn't a question about whether the trust can do this or not. And the suggestion that if we're going to have only one entity, it should be the Housing Authority, misses the fact that back when we only had a housing authority, in order to fund anything, there was a private nonprofit that needed to be here to be able to fund it. So if we're going to have one entity, an entity that can fund housing is a critical part of that. The other thing is that the only way that affordable housing is going to get built in this town is if there is a community, a shared community sense of what we want as a community. And having been in the trenches on this for a dozen years, I can tell you that there is no clear shared sense. Where that clear shared sense can come from is this master planning process that we are about to embark on. That's going to take some time. The reason why the Housing Trust has not addressed and doesn't have a plan aside from the housing production plan, which isn't really a particular clear path towards getting something done, is because for the last several years, all of our energies related to housing, and mine as well, has been dedicated to just trying to engage in, as others have referred to, engage in a rational conversation just to be able to be on the same page. And that was an immense amount of energy. And the intent here is to put that behind us, try to find a way to move forward. The master planning process is the process by which we will be able to see if we can develop a shared community understanding of what we want to do in housing. Until we do that, any sense that nothing is being done now because the selectmen are too busy is just not true.
Thank you. At microphone 4, please.
Thank you. Charlie Schiappa, 135 Stern Street. My concern is that we put too much emphasis on the master plan and that we expect that to be the panacea for many of the things that need to be taken care of in our town. We have financial needs, we have housing needs, many other, school, etc. The town used to have a coordinator for housing. We no longer have a coordinator for housing. And you really have to ask the question, since this is a very complex topic, who has the time to spend on it? And I think that having the trust having divided responsibilities with other areas of the town means that we won't get enough mind share, enough time, enough hours in the day. That meeting that was referred to a few minutes ago, the topic of 108 Stern Street didn't come up till after midnight. And there were many other pressing topics like taking care of trash and whether we should pay per bag or not. And that took up the time of the committee. So to talk about where are we going to find the time to have a plan for housing, I think it's not responsible to put it on back into most of the folks that are on the selectmen. So I would ask one question, and the question is, our past production plan for housing was done in 2015. When is the next housing production plan going to be done, and who is responsible for doing it?
Thank you. Can anyone answer that?
It's basically going to be done coincidentally with the master planning process, as will the open space and recreation plan. If I could provide one other area of clarification in relation to the question of having enough time. The group home was initiated, the purchase of the property, the idea behind what was going to be done there was done entirely by the Carlisle Affordable Housing Trust. The trust deputized the housing authority, because we have a housing authority, and the housing coordinator to work on and develop an RFP and enter into a lease agreement. All of that activity that was done by the housing authority can be done by regional housing service offices, of which Carlisle could become a member, and can be done by professionals that the town can engage, and can be done much more efficiently and cheaply than having a housing coordinator, which we dealt with a year ago or 2 years ago. So there's nothing, again, the Housing Trust was the one that initiated that project. The Housing Authority was merely the entity that brought it forward. A few years ago, the Mosquito ran an article talking to the Housing Authority about what their job was, and members of the Housing Authority, including members who recently resigned, stated that the Housing Trust is the entity that is the one that comes up with the ideas and develops the initiative and gets the property lined up. Our job is just to carry that out. So the suggestion and the view people have that we need the Housing Authority to come up with the ideas isn't even consistent with what the Housing Authority's view of themselves was. And again, all of those activities of carrying those things forward, there are ways to get that done, and they don't require the Housing Trust to do them. And the state is extremely invested in getting affordable housing done and provides all kinds of resources. There are a whole list of
Okay, Mr. Friedman, I think you've made your point in answering that question. At microphone 4, please.
Bob McCauley, 129 Log Hill Road in Carlisle. I support this article. I find the discussion about affordable housing to be rather ironic when a lot of the town is graying, and today we all paid our real estate tax bills, and those of us who are widows and live on a single fixed income, we don't have an expiration date printed on our behinds, so who knows how long we're going to have to pay taxes. And I think that the first order of business in the master planning process that we agreed to, kind of as a royal we, I think we all ought to get involved in it. And if we're concerned about affordable housing for people who don't live in town yet, we should first think about people who do live in town and who are facing the question of, can I afford to live in Carlisle and age in place? I'd hate to see, people who work in town, yeah, would it be nice if they lived in town? Sure. But if they live in Acton or Carlisle or some other town and they have to commute, isn't that a shame? Because we all commuted when we were working. So I support this article, and I think the selectmen should listen to whatever comes out of the master planning process that deals with the fact that taxes are a problem. We don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem, and we have to address that. Everything in this town meeting just gets approved, and it's all round numbers, and I think it's time we began to look at the people who may not be able to live in this town as opposed to the people who want to live in this town with affordable housing.
Thank you. Mr. Levitan, very briefly.
I'll
Third
be
bite
brief.
at the apple.
First of all, there's no one who's suggesting we don't continue having a housing trust. And there's no issue with having a trust be the strategic and financial eyes and ears to enable the housing trust or people who are in the housing authority or people who have similar responsibilities in the trust to execute on the ground. That's not an issue. The issue for me is, in fact, the word trust, all right? We've just been asked to trust the trust. They do have all these tools at their disposal. They do have all of the impetus that they could possibly have to put together programs in front of the town to get shared consensus. We don't have to wait for a master plan. We never had to wait for a master plan. So if the past is prologue, there's been no activity for many, many years now. Why should we believe there's going to be some now? I'd love to hear it. I really do.
I think you've made your point. Is there anything new to say? Okay. Ms. Huber, very briefly.
Ellen Huber, 15 Partridge Lane. I was ignorant of all that the trust did, and I understand the need for both groups now. But I hope that we can have an elected body whose sole job is to proceed with housing issues.
Thank you. Ms. Deary, did you want to speak? Okay, anyone else who wants to speak on this, get to the microphones now, because otherwise we'll be going right to a vote.
Maureen Cosgrove Deary, 575 South Street, also known as Benfield. I've spent most of my life working in housing, starting with people with mental health, physical health, and now I live in housing thanks to all of you. I don't think there's a person I've met on any board, current or former, who does not want some type of housing. The problem is we can't come together and agree. I support this idea. I support the master planning, working with the trust, and I would hope the trust eventually gets larger with more people who are not selectmen, which would solve some of the problem. Personally, I have to say, since the Housing Authority resigned and the people who live at Benfield, along with me, many of them with advanced degrees in science and engineering, have had to fight to keep the building maintained that you have built. There have been huge problems, no heat, no air conditioning, no lights, and during this process of the appointed Housing Authority coming into existence and the trust getting back involved is the first time that we've been able to solve these problems. So to build housing is great, but if you do not take care of it, it's useless. So I ask you to please vote yes.
Thank you. Ms. Guarino, you get the last word.
All right.
I meant what correct thing.
Kelly Garino, 119 Maple Street. Hadn't planned to talk on this article, but just listening to the speakers and what's been said, mostly against and just I think a little bit for, felt like I should add some support for this article and what I see as reasons that make sense to move ahead this way. I think the quote was, if past is prologue. What we've seen of the past of having two housing entities is that it doesn't work very well. There's enough overlap that having one, and I see this as a good way to move forward and to leave behind what hasn't worked and to move ahead with a structure that does. There was a reason that the statute was put in to be able to create affordable housing trusts in towns and to make the process easier and to not have to go to the legislature, be able to vote it at town meeting and to give those housing trusts all of the authority that they need to raise funds and hold the funds and put everything in one place. And so it's clearly a better vehicle, and moving ahead with one instead of trying to do this mishmash between two, I think makes sense and would be a clearer way to move ahead on our housing issues.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are now ready to vote, and we are on Article 33, 32. Why am I having such problems
tonight?
Yeah, maybe I do have an expiration date. It's a good line. I like that one. Okay. 32. If I got it right? Okay. Yes. Article 32, which would dissolve the Carlisle Housing Authority. We'll try a voice vote, but I suspect we may have to get your cards out. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Nay. Okay, let's see the cards. All those in favor? Okay, opposed? That carries by a majority, and I so declare.
Two-thirds.
I'm sorry, is it two-thirds?
It's a majority.
It is a majority, okay. You gave yourself some heart attacks up here. Okay, so now we're on to Article 33. I recognize Mr. Escalillo.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I move Article 3 as written in the motions. 33. As written in the motions. And see, you've messed everybody up, Wayne. As written in the motions handout.
Thank you. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. And now, Mr. Friedman, you were going to speak to this one? Is that correct?
So having dissolved the, or having voted to dissolve the Housing Authority, and to be clear, it's not officially dissolved until DHCD confirms that the various steps that need to be taken were taken. But the Article 33 is to amend the membership of the Community Preservation Committee to change the member that is currently from the Carlisle Housing Authority to a member of the Affordable Housing Trust. However, it includes language that it is provided that the appointee shall be a trustee, not also serving on the Board of Selectmen, because the Board of Selectmen is also represented on the Community Preservation Committee. So this will ensure that one of the non-selectmen members of the Affordable Housing Trust will represent housing interests on the Community Preservation Committee, which is an important committee since one of the three main buckets is related to housing.
Thank you. Both the Planning Board and Board of Selectmen voted unanimously to support this article. Any other boards or committees vote on it? Seeing none, the floor is open for discussion. Okay, then let's move right to a vote. Article 33 would change the designation from the Housing Authority to the Affordable Housing Trust in the bylaw that governs the membership of the Community Preservation Committee. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously, and I so declare. Article 34 was a citizen petition. The petitioners have indicated that they do not intend to make a motion at town meeting. So with the meeting's consent, we will take no action and move on to Article 35. And I'm sorry, who was going to make the, yeah. No, it's not. I just asked for the consent. No objection. Mr. Allen, are you going to make the motion?
Yes, I will.
Okay, I recognize Mr. Allen.
I move Article 35 as printed in the motions handbook.
Okay.
I move Article 35 as printed in the motions handbook.
And a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Allen, you have the floor.
Good evening. I'm Don Allen, Pilgrim Path, and my co-presenter is Kay Hurley, School Street. Section 10.1 of the current bylaws contains 5 subsections that address hunting and use of firearms and explosives on town land and private land, as well as self-defense, law enforcement, and enforcement of the bylaw itself. Excuse me. We're going to concern ourselves tonight only with the first of the 5 subsections, 10.1.1, which addresses hunting on town land and other issues on town land. The issue we propose to address is that while by default no hunting is permitted on town land, there is an exception. The selectmen can grant permission to hunt on town land, and as you perhaps know, they have. A pilot deer hunt took place on town land in the fall of 2018. We are proposing to remove the word hunt from subsection 10.1.1 and add a new subsection, 10.1.2, that states that there shall be no hunting on town land. The 4 subsections that follow are renumbered, but are otherwise unchanged. We manage our town by delegating most decisions to our town officials for obvious reasons. We reserve only the most important decisions for town meeting.
We believe that decisions about hunting on town land, because of the importance of the issue, should be decided by town meeting. This is currently not the case.
Some history on this topic is necessary to see how we got to where we are. In May of 2015, we voted in a town-wide ballot, and the exact wording of that ballot question is significant. Shall the town of Carlisle request the selectmen to place an article on the next town meeting warrant to regulate bow hunting on town-owned lands as an approach to deer management? This was a non-binding referendum, but the outcome was clear. People felt that this belonged in town meeting. In the month following the ballot question, the selectmen finalized a mission statement and began the necessary steps to formulate a working group which subsequently became known as the Deer Committee. This committee had its first meeting 2 years later with the stated objective to bring regulations for deer hunting to town meeting. Nevertheless, despite the ballot question vote and the mission of the Deer Committee, a hunt occurred in 2018 without a town meeting vote. The selectmen were technically within their rights because of the exception in the bylaw. Now, because of that, we propose removing the exception clause, the loophole, as it applies to hunting. And we propose to stop hunting on town-owned land. Together, these changes mean that future decisions to permit hunting on town land must come to town meeting. This proposal leaves safety regulations as they relate to firearms and explosives exactly as they were, and it also has no effect on hunting on state-owned land, federal land, or privately owned land.
We all weigh costs versus benefits when making important decisions. The costs and perceived benefits of hunting on town land are listed in the slide that you can see. The costs are risk of injury or death to a person using our conservation land, for which we've all paid dearly during the hunting season, use of it during the hunting season, or being deprived of its use because of the risk. The perceived benefits of deer population reduction are lessened incidence of Lyme disease and the other issues attributed to the size of the deer herd that you can see here. Let's look at these more closely. Lyme disease is a legitimate concern for all of us. The research on the Lyme disease deer population relationship has evolved rapidly in recent years, which has led to the statements you see, both from 2 Carlisle committees and the Centers for Disease Control. It's natural to assume fewer deer, less Lyme disease, but the science says otherwise in most cases. The exception is a closed system, such as an island, where you can eliminate the deer herd entirely or nearly so. In the phrase specific ecological circumstances in the 3rd bullet, the CDC is referring to exactly this. Obviously, Carlisle is not a closed system, unless we were willing to build a wall around the town and get Concord to pay for it.
They may, actually.
Even then, we'd have a problem because there are large areas of Carlisle on which no hunting is permitted, such as the state park, Great Brook State Park. Now to the other perceived benefits of town land hunting and deer population reduction. If the hunt were to continue at current levels in future years, the reduction would be negligible. Only a small percentage of the deer herd would be killed, as you can see on the slide, partially or completely offset by the fact that deer herds respond to hunts with increased reproduction rates because more resources are available per deer. And the Carlisle deer density will equalize with that of surrounding towns and large non-hunting areas within Carlisle, such as Great Brook Farm. Nature abhors a vacuum, and deer don't know about town boundaries. If the impact on the deer population is negligible, why not expand the hunt? Because expanding the hunt in time or size increases the risk of someone being injured or killed. Skydiving once carries some risk of death. Common sense suggests that skydiving every day for 5 years carries an increased risk of death. And probability math confirms our common sense. And if we increase the number of people jumping out of the plane each time, we again increase the risk of someone being killed. Similarly, if we repeat the 2018 hunt for years into the future, and/or we expand the size of the hunt each year to try to take a larger percentage of the deer herd, we increase the risk of an accident we would all regret. The greater the inherent risk of an activity, the greater are the increases with expansion in time and/or size. Only if we are certain that the activity we are discussing is perfectly safe, carries zero risk, can we expand in time or size without increased risk. We cannot say this about hunting or bow hunting. This increased risk with expansion in time or size is one of life's no free lunch situations.
To be clear, this article is not about whether hunting is a good or bad tool for managing deer, nor is it about whether or not we actually have a deer problem. It is about making sure hunting decisions on town land are made at town meeting. It is about what we lose and what we gain, and it is about the kind of town we want to live in.
You're at 8 minutes, so please wrap up.
So to wrap up, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Hunting on town-owned land is a very big issue. It's much, much more than deer management. It's both land use policy and safety. If we vote no, we leave ourselves open to risks of more hunts, bigger hunts, hunting other species, more parcels, shotguns, muzzle loaders, all without a town meeting vote. So vote yes on Article 35. You won't lose anything. You'll gain something, a vote and safe, unfettered use of our conservation land. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we had a variety of votes from boards and committees. The Board of Selectmen voted unanimously not to support. Conservation Commission also voted unanimous. I don't have the actual vote, but they did vote not to support. The Trails Committee voted unanimously not to support. Did we have votes from any other town boards or committees to report? Okay, with this, the floor is open for discussion. Okay, looks like we have a lot of interest. Feel free to array yourselves around the room. Try not to use microphone 3 unless you really need to, because you're in a wheelchair, because I can't see you back there. So try to use these 4 microphones down front. I will ask people to be brief. If we have more than 2 or 3 people stacked up, feel free to just sit close by, and that way it'll be a little bit easier. So let's start at microphone number 1.
Thank you. My name is Mike Hanauer. I live at the very end of Long Ridge Road. I've seen what's been going on. I'm right on the Davis corridor. Virtually every day for weeks, a large SUV was parked at the end of my driveway for the hunt. He killed a number of these beautiful animals and isn't even a Carlisle resident. The hunt itself has virtually no honest benefits to humans or nature, and yet has so many negatives both for the deer and for those of us who cherish the tranquility of our spaces and our neighborhoods. Especially if you live near one of the utilized trailheads, you have seen and felt the intrusion and the pain. Believing we can conquer and control nature for the benefit of outsiders and the detriment of Carlinians and nature is a self-serving rationalization. Please, let's put nature, the environment, and our town first. Please, let's stop the pain, the killing, and the self-deception. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 2, please.
Hi, I'm Allison Becker. I live on Prospect Street. Actually, I probably enter the woods right where he does. I'm not a hunter. I don't technically oppose hunting. Like, actually, I have land in Vermont. I have about 120 acres with my siblings, and in 20 years, I've never, ever, ever denied a hunter use of that land because those hunters fill their freezers and feed their families. But I would, however, like to share how hunting, why is this not working? Why hunting on Carlisle's conservation land has affected me and my family this fall. It felt oppressive. I walk or I run in the woods every single day. It's my meditation. I practice breathing in the woods. I think about letters I need to write, hash out parenting and family decisions. I use the woods because it's comforting and it has a peaceful setting. I did not feel comfortable heading out of my home trails in the Davis corridor on any day this past fall except for Sundays. And even Sundays felt full of anxiety as I scanned the landscape looking for evidence of a kill that my dog might find tempting. That happened once, but I did find trash near one of the stands on Two Rod Road on more than one Sunday. I was also able to see that stand because it was very close to the trail and it pointed right at the trail. I lost my sense of peace. I felt on edge for every walk, so I stopped. My kids use the trails to ride, and they ride their bikes to school, and they also stopped. 14 years I've been here, and I've been in the habit of walking in the woods every single day, and this hunt forced me off the trails for 2 months. We didn't share the space peacefully with hunters. We conceded it. I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. I have other parent friends whose kids refuse to hike this fall. I bump into my neighbors every Sunday. We're all out on the street, like running for the trail because we know it's the one day we can enjoy it hunter-free. I'm a sane, rational person. I listen to science. I compromise. I concede my position for the common good, but I just want a voice. I'll listen to other voices, but I want this to be a town meeting thing where we come together and we discuss and we decide together. I don't want to leave this in the hands of people who, you know, maybe hunting advocates, they got friends who want license, I don't know. I would like this to come to town meeting and I would like to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 4, please.
Yes, George Mahalik, Canterbury Court. Sorry, George Mahalik, Canterbury Court. First off, I'd like to let you folks know I'm one of the hunters that participated in the event this past year. And a little bit about me. I'm from Princeton, New Jersey, which if anybody has ever gone to school down there or lived down there, Princeton has a big problem because they banned deer hunting 50, 60 years ago. 20 years ago, they realized they had a problem and they found out they couldn't fix it, even with bow hunting. And it's gotten so bad over the years that they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in their budget, town budget, to manage the deer herd, or try to by hiring snipers to come in the middle of the night and slaughter the animals and then take them to a dump. The most ethical way to manage and control the deer herd is for hunters who have gone through the process of selection that are safe hunters, and there's been 0 deaths caused by bow hunting in the last history of Massachusetts. So the danger to somebody walking on the trails is 0, or their pets. Maximum distance for me to shoot is maybe to that screen, furthest, that I would even contemplate. And you're 20 feet up in a tree, you know what you're shooting at. There's going to be no accident at all. It's impossible. I guarantee that. And a little bit more about my history. I was in the Marine Corps. I spent a few years I was in Beirut in 1983, and I was in the barracks where the Marines died. And I suffered a destroyed ankle, and I had I got over it, and I was a runner, an ultramarathoner, a triathlete. And 2 years ago, my ankle got so bad I needed a replacement, and I had it this past June. I was devastated. I can never run again. But I love hunting, and the Deer Committee was kind enough to give me the opportunity to go into the woods behind my house. I abut the Davis corridor. So instead of walking a mile, which I couldn't do, I was able to walk a couple hundred yards and hunt. I took 2 deer, which is more than what I usually take. I usually take 1. And then I donated that other deer to a homeless shelter, which fed people. So in doing this, I felt like I contributed to the community because we do have a deer problem. Nobody is contesting that. 60 to 90 per mile in a square mile is way above the 15 average that it should be for a healthy herd. We're going to have to address this, if not now, years later. So we're just passing the buck if we ban hunting. And I think bow hunters are the best, but above all, I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to do something I'm passionate about that gave me purpose in a time where I had none. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. One comment. I spoke earlier about civility on the part of the speakers, and I appreciate all the speakers tonight have done very well on that. I should also mention that civility is also expected on the part of the audience. So if I did hear some complaint about some of that last night. When speakers are talking, really, we're looking for no reaction from you. Now, if anyone does come up with a line as good as Mr. Allen's about Concord building a wall for us, feel free to laugh. That's okay. But otherwise, please no verbal commentary in any way to your neighbors or whatever when anyone is speaking. Microphone 5, please.
Henry Hedden, 98 East Riding Drive. One of the reasons mentioned for this proposed ban was the risk of hunting accidents. Have there been any hunting accidents in Carlisle in the recent past?
Is that going to be your only question? If you have other questions, please just give them all and we'll see if someone has answers to them.
No, that's my only question.
Okay. Is there anyone who can give a brief yes or no answer to that? I'm sorry? Okay, microphone 4, please.
Dan Boyanich, 93 Clarks Farm Road. There have been no bow hunting accidents where a hunter has injured a member of the public or a dog in recorded Massachusetts history, the whole state. It is an extremely safe activity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 1, please.
Bonnie Mishkolzi, 447 Cross Street. And full disclosure, I grew up on venison and elk during World War II. And so I have maybe a bit of a different idea. But I want to thank the committee for doing all the research. I think we need to know as much as we possibly can. One thing that I'm very concerned about is the loss of biodiversity. And I've watched this on my own land. I have lost a long list of plants, just a few. Hemlocks, small ones, viburnums, hazelnuts. I can't read my writing. New England asters, lady slippers, all kinds of azaleas. And this has happened fairly recently. It didn't happen when I first moved here. It seems to me that one season is not enough to really decide whether hunting is a benefit or not. The committee did its job by increasing the risks and decreasing the benefits, but I think we need more time to really analyze it properly. So I would not ban.
Thank you. At microphone 2, please.
Hi, Barbara Bjornson, Prospect Street. So full disclosure, I'm not a hunter. I have been very aware of the issues around this because close family and friends are. A couple points I want to make is, first, that I don't think it's helpful for any of us to be listening to language about explosives and firearms, because that's not what this is about. This was about a very controlled experiment that was managed very, very tightly by the selectmen, who we have elected to manage us as a town. And the purpose was to allow limited hunting by bow on town land. And it wasn't target shooting. It was for the benefit of people to be able to take that venison home and consume it. I think that's very consistent with the culture of Carlisle. where we're very rural and we appreciate what's around us. I would much rather see a continuation of this than continue to see deer dead by the side of the road. And I absolutely am against what is proposed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 4.
Dan Boyanich, 93 Clarks Farm Road. I'm actually a member of the Deer Committee, and I'm also the deer agent. I just want to let you know that when I heard that Carlisle was going to institute hunting, I actually volunteered to join the committee and to become the deer agent. And the reason for that is that I wanted to ensure, as a citizen of Carlisle, that we could do it in the safest possible way. And so we instituted what I consider, and in fact my committee members, and hopefully all of you will agree, the highest levels of safety and standards in terms of selecting our hunters who have the highest levels of proficiency and expertise in order to be able to execute the hunt. Now, bow hunting was chosen because it is the most effective way to harvest deer as far as safety is concerned. We may have different opinions overall as to whether we should hunt or not, but I think we can all agree that we do have a deer problem. And the most effective way to reduce the deer population is through bow hunting. And therefore, we instituted bow hunting only. There is absolutely no desire to institute hunting via shotgun or muzzleloader. It's bow hunting only. A lot of towns in this area have also got a deer problem. A lot of towns have instituted bow hunting. So I think all the towns need to work together in order to be able to reduce the deer population. Mass Wildlife issued 12,000 surplus doe permits for Zone 10. Zone 10 is basically the whole area north of Mass Pike and east of the 495. We really do have a big deer problem and we have to address it. I've actually gone through the police blotter reports over the last few years, and on average we're hitting about 30 deer a year. We have 30 police blotter reports which show that there are deer instances, occurrences happening per year. Okay, so the other element is that there is no intention to actually hunt other species. This is specifically to be able to reduce the deer population. And what we need to do is really support each other in terms of being able to do that. It is the only effective way that we can actually address the deer population. There is no other method which is as effective. Sterilization does not work. Deer hunting is the only way to actually address the problem because the natural predators have all been eliminated. We're the only ones left.
Thank you. Microphone 5.
Point of order.
Yes, sir. Please identify yourself.
My name is George Vendura, 898 Maple Street. I listened to Dan. I've been listening to Dan since September.
You have to state your point of order right away.
My point of order is the wildlife, the mass wildlife information that he has given us.
That is not a point of order. If you want to dispute
Yes.
what he said, then you can get in line like everyone else and say what you want to say.
Oh, thank you. I didn't understand it that way. Thank you.
Okay. Let's proceed at microphone 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Angie Verge, 29 Indian Hill, Conservation Commission Chair. And the CONSCOM voted unanimously to oppose this ban on the hunting, and I wanted to explain why. And our main concern is the health of the forests. And this is the reason why we supported the deer hunt initiative in the first place. The high density of the deer population is very concerning. There's overbrowsing of the vegetation. The way a healthy forest works is mature trees die, decline, the sapling layer, successional growth, comes up, fills in the canopy, and maintains a level of vegetation on the forest floor. Oak saplings are delicious to deer, and they have been eating all of these smaller saplings, and this really is affecting the health. And basically, it changes the composition of the vegetation on the forest floor and really seriously affects habitat, and that is a conservation issue. And this is happening all over the Northeast. I mean, the deer are a serious problem, as we've heard this evening. And Mass Fisheries and Wildlife, they support the bow hunting. As it was stated before, the natural predators of deer are, in the past, the reason the populations were kept in check was thanks to the wolves, mountain lions, and humans. Looks like we're the only ones left, unless we're going to count on the coyotes to take care of it. Last year, it was a pilot program. I mean, this is the first time we've ever done this. The Deer Committee did a fantastic job looking at other town models, state models, to come up with regulations that fit the town of Carlisle. Were there problems? Yes. But I would look to the Deer Committee to resolve that and change the regulations and adjust and revise so that we can continue the deer hunt to manage the health of our forests. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize Mr. Brown on the stage.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm not cutting. I told him a little while ago I'd like to go. Sorry, can you hear me now? I'm also blocked from many people. I don't want to repeat. Angie just mentioned much of what I was going to say, which is that the reason why we did this was because of the overgrazing and trying to bring our conservation land back in. This is a pilot program. We went through 1 year. We learned a lot. We will make adjustments. And if we're allowed to continue the hunt, things will be different next year and from what we learned this year. I also want to just point out that there was one number that was given about the number of deer hits. So one thing is that earlier, we talked about funding crosswalks. Throughout that entire process, one of the reasons why we wanted to spend that money was because of auto collisions at the crosswalks where somebody stopped, somebody just ran into the back of them. Very, very important that we fix that. Pedestrian safety is very, very important. Reducing accidents is very, very important. I checked with Chief Fisher, and in the last 3 years, there have been 4 of those, yet in that same period of time, there have been 81 deer strikes. Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 1.
John Keating, 133 Forest Park Drive. I'm also a member at large of the Deer Committee. So I don't know if anyone got one of these in the mail. I got them from the concerned Carlisle citizens. After reading this and seeing the presentation, I don't think I'm going to get out of bed tomorrow. But no, seriously. I've been retired for 4 years. In my 37 years as a civil servant, I worked for the Commonwealth. My bosses, who were the managers, worked at the discretion of the governor. But I worked for the people of the Commonwealth for 37 years. I was recruited for the Deer Committee because I am also a hunter. And I'm working for the people of Carlisle. I'm concerned about our health, the health of the forest, the health of the town. So I just wanted to say I had put an article in the Mosquito with some studies that were done on deer. Some of the people who have been here for over 20 years or so in town may remember the 49 deer that were tranquilized and radio collared, and they were studied. They were studied along with 2 other towns in the Commonwealth, Plymouth and Worthington. In Plymouth and Worthington, hunting works at controlling the number of deer. The trend 20 years ago was that the population in Carlisle was going to increase. I think that's what's happened. So, I mean, everyone who lives in this town understands that the deer population has increased. So what I'd like people to do is think about what some of the conservation experts and wildlife biologists for some of the major conservation organizations in this area. Trustees of reservations, Sudbury Valley Trust, the New England Forestry Foundation, the Nature Conservancy of Mass, and the New England Wildflower Society, just to name a few,
are concerned about the deer population and say that hunting is the best way to control those populations. So I ask you to consider this when you make your vote today and vote against this change in the town bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. I see there's still a lot of people to speak. So far, we've been doing a pretty good job of actually not being repetitive, and so I thank everyone for doing that. I would just put out a friendly warning to those of you who are still waiting to speak. Your probability of repeating someone else's argument increases over time. And so, having people have been good enough to come out tonight, which is all very much appreciated. So if you would just try to make sure that you try really hard not to repeat arguments that have already been made, that will be most appreciated by everyone, I'm sure. Microphone 2.
Tom Bjornson, 38 Prospect Street. I've lived in Carlisle for 25 years, grew up in Concord, so I've lived in this area my whole life. I've been hunting for 48 years, and I've done most of my hunting in Maine. And I always thought, wow, I go to Maine, and there's so many deer around here. And I pay attention to deer. I'm driving down the road, I'll see 6 deer over there, I'll see 7 deer over there, I'll see 12 deer over here. I see deer every single day, morning when I go to work, and evening when I drive back. And I see multiple deer. I've been, like I said, hunting in Maine, mostly, and I've seen areas in Maine where there's an overpopulation of deer, and there's an area that people say, okay, we don't want any deer hunting here. And they've forbidden deer hunting in that area. And I've seen deer starve. I've seen sickness and disease run through the herd unbelievably, to the point where they have to bring snipers in from the state, which was talked about earlier, to kill these deer. And they don't even do anything with the bodies. Nobody takes the meat because they're all sick deer. And they're sick deer because they can't get the nutrition that they need, because there's too many deer out there to eat all that food. And I'm also on one of the deer hunters in Carlisle. And I was pretty excited. I was saying, wow, I've lived here for 25 years. I've never hunted in this town, and I love that. I didn't get a deer. I didn't see a deer. I picked the wrong spot. But also, I will tell you this. Where I was, there was a trail that was about 100 yards from me, and people were walking up and down that trail, whooping and hollering and screaming and trying to chase away the deer that they knew that I was out there somewhere, but they're trying to chase the deer away. Not that I think that they had any effect at all, because I just picked a bad spot. But the reality is that I understand that everybody is afraid of hunting and shooting and everything else. Bow hunting is so precise. You're shooting at a target. When you shoot at a target, you're going for a target this big at 20, 30, 35 yards. And you see that target and you shoot at it. There's no like an arrow goes off here or arrow goes off there. I see a dog. No hunter who knows what they're doing, and believe me, every single hunter who hunted in Carlisle.
You're at 3 minutes, so please finish that thought.
Yes, let me finish. Every single hunter in the town of Carlisle was tested with their accuracy, and they are all very precise and would never shoot a dog or a person or anybody else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Microphone 4.
Mitchell Weiss, 523 Brook Street. We live across the street from the Green Owl Land. We have offered up our property to hunters before, and they didn't take us up on it because we didn't want the deer eating all the foliage. But this article, is not about a ban on hunting. It's about a right to bring it to a town meeting vote. It's changing one word to take the decision away from the selectmen.
I do not want to hear any comment either way from anyone in the audience. Sorry to interrupt you, sir. You may resume.
This is not a judgment on the value of hunting, the effectiveness on culling deer, the importance of taking deer out of the population or leaving them in the population, or how nice they look or how much they graze. It's a problem for all of us. And it's not an argument about hunters' skills, although my daughter was an Olympic trials archer, and we went to many tournaments and saw many misses of the little target. That's how people win and lose in this game. But that's not what this is about. This is about changing the bylaw so these decisions come to the town as a whole and are not made not in accordance with what was directly voted on by the people a few years ago. So I support this.
Thank you. Microphone 5, please.
Josh Kablotsky, Nichols Lane. I think the arguments about bow hunting being very safe are really beside the point. What we've seen is that bow hunting on public land inhibits the peaceful, quiet enjoyment of that land by the citizens of this town. And eventually that will go one of two ways. Either it'll reduce the support for public lands and their quiet, peaceful enjoyment because people won't use them. Or, as we see, and I have a number of children in town, they spend less time outdoors. And that's something I would like to encourage them to get out. When they throw up an obstacle of, I can't go out now, they're hunting in those woods. That's an obstacle. I would like to remove obstacles to the quiet and peaceful enjoyment of the town lands. And I think this article goes towards that. One last point, it was said about how there are changes to the natural environment because of the deer population. There's another population that has even greater changes to the natural environment. That's the people in this room. And we need to be mindful of the fact that, yes, other species affect the environment. We do too. Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 1, please.
Excuse me. J. Kevin McNamara, 20 Estabrook Road. I'm the person that wrote the article in the Mosquito in response to this, and I am against this. And I want to mention, just for the purpose.
Could you get a little closer to the
Sure.
microphone, please? Thank you.
There we go. The reason that I am against this is a couple of things. We elect you all as selectmen. We trust you to go do your jobs. When we start taking away your executive capabilities, we take away a lot more. I'm worried about this being a precedent to bring in all other types of things, to take away decisions and bring that back to town votes, where we have just special interest groups showing up for that vote and doing those kinds of things. I will mention, I am a hunter. I don't hunt in Carlisle. In fact, I've never hunted deer in Massachusetts. The fact is that I agree with both sides here. It isn't about hunting. It's certainly not about firearms, but it is about using our town resources for everybody. This hunting season is not all year. It's a very limited period of time. And it addresses a very important factor in controlling and having an influence over our environment and health that's been mentioned. I'm not going to repeat that. But I think that we put the selectmen in place to go do their job. I think this is an effort to take that decision away because there were certain people that didn't like the fact that you all had gone through and done a great job, and Mr. Bojanic did a superior job in executing his duties and managing an incredible process. I thank you for what you do. I thank Dan for what he does, and I vote against this particular motion.
Thank you. At microphone 2, please.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Luttrell, 105 Woodridge Road.
Please get close to the microphone.
Elizabeth Luttrell, 105 Woodridge Road. Deer have been dubbed as keystone herbivore because they can exert wide-ranging influences on the distribution and abundance of other species at various levels. And this is really an expansion of what Bonnie said. They've had it.
You'll have to keep the microphone close to your mouth, please.
Deer have a significant negative impact on the overall ecology and health of forests where they're not controlled. Their excessive browse can easily destroy our most sensitive and desirable native plant communities. This impacts insects, including many pollinators, when flowering plants, including wildflowers, shrubs, and young trees, disappear. Insects rely on plants for food and nectar, and migrant birds rely on insects as their primary food source. Deer browse disrupts ecological interrelationships that have occurred over thousands of years. When deer remove understory plants, wildflowers, and native tree seedlings, they create opportunities for non-native invasives to spread. These plants have little wildlife value and further degrade the native forest ecosystem. You cannot believe how the forests have changed around New York and Fairfield County, Connecticut. Practically nothing grows in their understory. Their deer-blighted forests lack biological diversity. In some places, they are practically devoid of life and are certainly quiet, with few birds singing or insects trilling. So I hope you'll look at this question through the lens of forest management and support deer hunting, deer bow hunting. People in Carlisle who have deer fenced their property observe a much richer flora compared with the adjacent forest. That's pretty much what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 4, please.
I'm Ed Hum, 776 East Street.
Please stay close to the microphone.
Our property adjoins the town forest, and we haven't noticed any larger increase in the deer population, but I'm concerned about, people got the green card which lists some of the problems. 2 of the major problems were not mentioned, and that is that the stands, 2 stands are found to be facing the trails, which they said would absolutely, they would be shooting away from the trails, and there was absolutely no discipline of the hunters in that case. There was also no discipline when, in 2 instances, they found the intestines of the deer left. In one case, which was reported in the mosquito, someone's dog rolled in it, and again, there was no discipline. The deer agent was of the opinion, as he is himself a hunter, that the hunters themselves would be self-policing. And when in major instances like this happened, there was nothing done. Just verbally, I'm sorry, that's fine, and that was it. I took a walk in the town forest. Sometimes I do that if I've been working outside. And in the process, ran across another walker, and he would happen to be on the trails committee. And basically, he had a dog with him, and it was interesting. The dog was carrying a stick. And what they do is, he had also a little saw. And on his head was an orange hat, and the dog had a little orange vest on. And there was a lot of people in the town that use the trails that during the hunting season, which ran for 2 of the best months of the year in the fall, do not want to use the trails, nor do they want their children to use the trails. We pay a lot of taxes in Carlisle, and yet for 2 months out of the year, we don't feel that we can safely use a trail except maybe on Sunday. And that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 5, please.
Steve Golson, 388 Stern Street, which is a scenic road in Carlisle.
Congratulations.
Mr. Moderator, I must say I've been here 35 years, and you've put together quite a town meeting this year. It's like 3 in 1.
No, actually, you can thank the selectmen for that.
Oh, no, you
Just
should
the
take...
chair?
I have a question for town council. And
you can pose the question. It's my discretion whether to have town council answer it.
oh, okay.
Just letting you know the rules of the game.
All righty. My concern is the new section 10.1.2, no person shall hunt within the limits of any highway, park, or other town-owned land. And the word park is not, there's no town-owned in front of it. I'm curious as to whether park would be expansively interpreted to include, for example, Great Meadows National Wildlife Refuge, which allows hunting. Or would the federal law supersede whatever town bylaw we attempt to put in place?
That's a fair question for town council, if we could have the answer.
He has no light back there.
And actually, if we could have the light on the stage, I think we don't need it darkened anymore. And feel free to come up here, you might as well. Stretch your legs.
It's so bright out here.
We keep them in the shadows.
So, Mr. Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, are we referring to section 10.1.1 in the motion?
2.
No, the proposed 10.1.2.
This is the new language.
No person shall hunt within the limits of any highway, park, or other town-owned land. I think the only way to read that section is that it all has to be town-owned land because we don't have the authority to regulate what goes on state or federal land.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Briefly, Mr. Moderator, I oppose this this article. I think that the selectmen and the Deer Committee did a prudent and fine job in a test hunt with ethical hunters, and I'm curious to hear their future activities in this area, and I trust your the selectmen's expertise in this area, and I do not support this article, and I do support ethical hunting of deer. Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 1, please.
Desiree Ball, 201 Prospect Street. 1.5 years ago, we voted to buy the Woodward land at Maple Street and Bedford Road. That transaction will eventually result in 38 acres of new conservation land. We all paid property tax for that purchase. Many people donated money to Carlisle Conservation Foundation for that purpose. We chose to do that because we value conservation land for the use and enjoyment we derive from it. Yet there are limits to how we use conservation land. Carlisle's Open Space and Recreation Plan lists activities that are allowed on conservation land, which in general are called passive recreation. There are other activities, like camping, for example, that are only allowed with a permit. There are still others listed as prohibited on all conservation land. Hunting is listed in this last category. I am one of the many people that contributed to that new conservation land through property tax and by donating to CCF. At the time, I believed what it said in the town plan, that hunting would be prohibited. Now I feel betrayed. As the presenters have reminded us, in 2015, a majority of voters checked yes for the ballot question. Shall the town of Carlisle request the selectmen to place an article on the next town meeting warrant to regulate bow hunting on town-owned land as an approach to deer management? Although we voted for it 350 to 90, did the selectmen do what the question called for? No, they have never placed such an article on any town meeting warrant, not in the next town meeting of 2016, nor in 2017, and not even in 2018. Perhaps the selectmen somehow misinterpreted a ballot question they wrote themselves. Nevertheless, there is no excuse for them not keeping their promise. The citizens of Carlisle were betrayed. So that in the future, we can have a say on this important public safety and land use issue, I am voting yes, and I urge you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 2, please.
Peter Carmichael, 94 Laurelwood Drive. I am a victim of the overpopulation of deer, or an indirect victim. I acquired Lyme, Bartonella, and babesiosis from tick bites. And I also have enjoyed trail walks in Carlisle and my own land, and the peaceful walking on Carlisle trails is kind of bad when you end up with a tick on you and you don't know it, and you end up not being able to read or not being able to walk for several months and not being able to read for 1.5 years. I used to be a software engineer. I am no longer. I'm on disability due to not being able to read and focus. So all these lovely trails that you walk, be very, very careful. Please protect yourself from the ticks that are due to the overabundance of deer and other things. So please be careful.
Thank you. At microphone 4, please.
Hi, I'm Steve Tobin, 164 Partridge Lane, and I'm the chairman of the Trails Committee. The Trails Committee unanimously voted the following statements. 1, the committee does not believe that the deer hunting program, as currently managed, presents a danger to trail users. And 2, the committee does not support a proposal to remove the authority from the selectmen to allow hunting. And I would also like to point out that the current exemption that allows the selectmen to allow hunting on town land was put there by town meeting. It's not something they came up with by themselves.
Thank you. At microphone 5.
Yes, I'm here to represent my 95-year-old.
Please introduce yourself first.
Oh, my name is George Vendura, 898 Maple Street, and I'm here because I'm afraid to go home because of my 94-year-old mother. She thinks that there's some issues here. We're getting gypped. That's her language. She's from the Bronx, and she talks freely. So I explained to her that, Mom, I said, we have to stay on the trail because that's the only way that's safe. She says, what about all the other land? She says, that's yours too. You pay for it. She says, no, 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 no. Mom, we have to stay on the trail. And everybody here knows that. Stay on the trail. It's safe. Bows and arrows, it's safe. Stay on the trail. But, Mom, the trail, when you take the area of the trails and the area of the land, it's only 0.8% of 0.8 of 1%. She says, what? And I said, well, that's 99.2% that we're getting kicked out of. And she gets hysterical. She says, you're getting gypped. You're getting gypped. Are you crazy? They're gypping you, don't you see? She says, how much is a gallon of gas? So I say, it's about $3. She says, then what's 0.8 of a gallon? And I said, a teaspoon, Mom. She says, stupid though, you're getting gypped. Well, Mom, that's the way it works. This is Carlisle. This isn't the Bronx. She says, well, what about the house? You have 2,000 square feet. I said, yes. She says, what's 0.81% of 2,000 square feet? Mom, it's the tile in the corner of the kitchen. She says, you stand in the corner and you stay there. You're stupid or you're getting gypped. She says, and what about those little blue pills that you're taking? I say, what about them, Mom? That's kind of private. She says, how much time do you spend with your wife? I said, well, she says, 0.8 of 1%? She says, and nothing else? All night and day? Well, Mom, you use it or you lose it. The town,
I think you've made your mother's point. Please move on.
She says, show me how it works. Please, show me how it works. I said, well, you hold up this piece of paper, Mom, and you vote. She said, no. You hold up this piece of paper. This is the piece of paper that we get 4 times a year. This is the piece of paper we just had today. She wanted to know what 0.08 is. This is what we're getting back for the $10,000 that this represents. This is 0.08 of what we're getting. They're taking out of our hide 99.2% of our investment of our taxes by constraining us to that path. I don't want to stay on the path. I don't want to stay in the corner of my kitchen.
You're at 3 minutes.
Okay.
Finish that thought and
Mama
please
says,
sit down.
Tell them, they're stupid though. They're sticking it up your nose. They're sticking this up your nose.
Okay,
They're
thank
sticking it
you.
up our nose.
Microphone 1, please.
Bob Supnick, 601 Heald Road. I've walked the Greeno public lands probably 150 times a year for the past 3 years with a friend and a friendly dog. And I always stick to the path, because if I go romping through the underbrush, it's an open invitation to an army of ticks to come on board. And my friend Peter is a living demonstration of what happens. And I know this is true because the dog sometimes does and comes back with an army of ticks. The paths are there for our safety all times of the year, not just during hunting season. I walked Greeno with the dog and a friend. Every weekday during hunting season, I never felt any danger. I never saw a hunter. I never saw a deer, for that matter.
Excuse me, could someone please, the rule last night was that you stand up and tell a joke, so get ready. You will be asked to stand up when Mr. Supnick is done. Mr. Supnick, please proceed.
Thank you. The only place I saw deer were in my backyard eating my garden. This was a pilot program. I trust that the selectmen and the deer committee will learn from the feedback that they have received and improve it over the years. I support this. The thought of yet more things being brought to town meeting, which has already run longer than Game of Thrones, fills me with the utmost horror. I will not support this article. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't ask you to stand, but I really do want everyone to make sure that your devices are silenced. What's going on here? I'm sorry? What is the disruption that we have here? Okay, very good. At microphone 2, please.
Julia Kropf, 110 Ice Pond Road. I believe whatever the law says, we don't actually own the conservation land. We hold it as a trust. We hold it as a trust not only for people, also for animals. It is not a living room. It is not an entertainment complex. It is, or it should be, close to wilderness. But we're not willing to allow it to be wilderness. We're not proposing to have wolves. We have a responsibility to maintain it, and we have a responsibility to the animals as well to look after the health of the forest. And one more thing, your children, I hope, will not only walk in Carlisle. In the rest of the country, during hunting season, you need to wear bright colors when you walk in the woods. It's a safety issue. Thank you.
Okay, at microphone 4, please.
Hi, my name is Brian Barmer, 68 Virginia Farm. I am not a hunter. However, I do support hunting. And I do support many of the ideas that the opposition has brought against this. My question, however, is dealing with the question at hand, whether selectmen have power or the town has power. On this slide here, it mentions twice that it should be decided by town meeting. However, the proposed bylaw lacks any mechanism for hunting to be returned based on town meeting, other than overriding this bylaw amendment with a 2/3 vote. So if it's really about giving the power to the town, why doesn't the bylaw include a mechanism for a simple majority vote for hunting?
Thank you. No, not yet. Let me just specifically answer that any 10 citizens are always free to bring a petition to bring something in front of town meeting. Your point of order, sir. Please address the microphone and state what your point is.
Don Allen, Pilgrim Path. It is my understanding that only zoning bylaws require a 2/3 majority. I believe that this is a simple majority.
Yes,
And to change this bylaw would be a simple majority.
Yes,
And if
I
I'm
didn't hear that as
incorrect,
being,
please tell me.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that as being a question. Thank you. I recognize Mr. Kissinger to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I was the Board of Selectmen's representative on the Deer Committee, and
When I arrived in that role in 2017, I found a committee of volunteers, men and women, who represented the police department, the Board of Health, Trails Committee, CONSCOM, citizens at large, and at least one hunter. And I found that they had been working at the direction of the Board of Selectmen to craft a pilot program that, in their view, would be safe, but also totally unobtrusive to the rest of the town. They crafted a plan that if you didn't know that it was going on, you wouldn't even know that it was happening. They not only limited the location of the hunters, a football field away from the closest path of any path on any of the parcels, but they also limited the number of hunters who would drive to the trailhead so that they wouldn't preclude other folks that wanted to use the trails from having parking spaces. So they further limited the number of people that could be in the program. It was very limiting, very safe, very unobtrusive to the town, until the opposition to this whole notion of deer hunting in town began to take shape and present itself in objection to every deer hunting meeting, many of the Board of Selectmen meetings, many of the CONSCOM meetings, many meetings. It was very clear that there were people that were passionately, genuinely, ardently opposed to having this done. At one point, there's no question, I don't believe, about the deer problem. You know, I opened last week's mosquito, there was a deer killed. When you open Friday's mosquito, you'll find that there's another deer killed this past Friday. There is definitely a problem that the selectmen are trying to creatively, safely, unobtrusively address. And it's just so unfortunate that so many people have been spooked by the notion that it's unsafe to walk the trails. Folks that live near the town forest, my friends that have walked those trails for decades, they've been here longer than me, are afraid to walk the trails. The young lady that spoke earlier is afraid to walk the trails. And I got this in the mail as an example. It says, of all the reasons not to, powerful crossbows used, very dangerous. Well, it happens that one of the hunters is handicapped. He can't use a normal bow, sitting up 20 feet into a tree trying to police the area. So he's authorized to use a crossbow, just part of that whole process.
You are at 3 minutes, so please finish your thought.
I suggested to the group that was opposed to this, bring it to town meeting, vote up or down whether or not we should continue to have the deer hunt. Instead of bringing that to town meeting, they brought to town meeting a change to the bylaws that would just prevent the deer hunt and prevent the selectmen from having the tools to address the problem.
Okay.
So that's why we voted to not support this amendment.
Okay, thank you. Back to microphone 2, please. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed you. Please, microphone 5. My mistake.
Thank you. My name is Jeannie Janetsko, 898 Maple Street. One of the things we're talking about is safety here. And one of the reasons that we need to have the vote at town meeting is because this year was a trial hunt. And this year was bow hunting, and the hunt was extended from October 15th to November 24th to follow what the state was doing. It went from October 1st to November 24th. But people are concerned, whether it's fear or perceived feeling of unsafety. That's important. Town land is something. We vote on things like ambulances, police cars, restrooms, small parks, flowers. It comes to town meeting. Maybe there's too much, but town land is an asset, and it deserves to be voted on. If we were asked to spend money on something else, it would come to town meeting. But I want to read something about this directly from the Deer Committee. And this was what this was from March 7th of 2018, and this is why we need a vote, because if this is what you want to have the decisions made without you, without town meeting, then obviously it's your right to do so. Claire Wilcox of Prospect Street believed the proposed hunting season was too long. After discussion, the committee voted unanimously to amend the regulations to allow bow hunting only during the Massachusetts bow hunting season for the first year of the hunting program, and not to include the shotgun or muzzleloader seasons as originally proposed. This means the Carlisle hunt on town lands would end on November 24th instead of December 31st this year. That means the hunt would have gone on for 3 months. This decision will be reviewed after the first year, taking into account the number of deer taken and feedback from the hunters and the public. So it is likely, because it is in the Deer Committee's own minutes, that they are going to use gun power in order to control what they consider to be the deer population. There are a lot of, I know I have 3 minutes and I'd like to come up several times for 3 minutes, but I'd like to address a couple things. What's frequently brought up by the deer agent is that there were 12,000 surplus deer permits offered by the state. The important thing to know is they don't sell 12,000, it's a money-making, and it's approximately 2,000 deer permits are basically sold. So it's misleading because it makes you think there's 12,000 deer. Sterilization, our own Tufts University has a wonderful program on. They basically have been working with Hastings on the Hudson. They are darting deer and getting wonderful success rates with basically controlling deer population. They're in their 5th year. If the 5th year works out well, then what happens is it's going to continue. The town is voted to go ahead, or is going to vote.
You're at 3 minutes, so please finish your thought.
Okay, this is the other thing that you should consider.
Not a new point, finish the
No,
thought.
well, this is the original thought. Can I just
Yes,
finish
please.
the one? Okay, if the deer count was not accurately done, of the total number of deer of 55 days with 18 hunters, 10 deer were killed. On Greeno, 0 deer were killed. This says that the hunt is ineffective, so we're losing access to town lands due to an ineffective hunt, and it won't accomplish anything that people said would happen.
Okay, thank you. At microphone 2.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Sims. I'm from Tophet Road. I'm not a deer hunter. I like Bambi. I think it's beautiful to see her walking through the forest. But with all that being said, we elect public servants to make decisions on our behalf for multiple issues, some very important, some minor. We have multiple committees who have reviewed this issue and all unanimously come up with the decision that this is the best and safest way to deal with the deer population. When we speak about safety, we've just heard the statistics that there's been 80 deer hits in our town in 3 years. We're fortunate none of those, hopefully, resulted in an automobile death or a person swerving into another lane to kill somebody else or to kill a child who's walking on the sidewalk as they go by. Our children are much in greater danger walking down East Street to school every morning than they are to be shot by a deer hunter with a crossbow over a 2-month period of time. So we go to the Conservation Committee to get our approvals for any number of different things we want to do on our property that we paid for, that our tax dollars are also being assessed on. We paid for all of this conservation land, but guess what? You have to maintain the conservation land. And that means you have to have rules in place. And part of this is about maintaining that land that we spent all that money for to ensure that it's not ruined by an overpopulated deer herd. So yes, we may be inconvenienced by it, but it's in the better long-term interest of maintaining that land for everyone's prolonged use. It's a sacrifice. We make sacrifices every day. But it's a sacrifice in the best interest of the town. It's a sacrifice in the best interest of personal safety. And it's a sacrifice in the best interest of the money that we spend today and will continue to spend on putting conservation land aside for our community use.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to microphone 4, and I would ask that if anyone intends to speak, get to the microphones, because there may be someone calling the question soon, and so get to the microphones now. Let's see who's here. Okay, very good. Microphone
Nancy
4,
Pearman.
please.
Nancy Pearman Weiss, 523 Brook Street. I kind of feel like the conversation's gone all over the place, but I would like to remind people that this does not prevent hunting on private property in town, which has been going on for years. There have been approximately 5 to 6 times the amount of deer taken on private property in this town every year than were taken this year at all. Also, the numbers that you're being reported take no account into the fluctuations of deer herds, which not this last winter, but the winter before took a big hit with the cold. I've heard things about how people felt going in the woods. People's feelings aren't wrong or right. That's how they feel. And we're weighing 9 people in town's ability to hunt on public land, not private land. They can hunt all they want on private land. Go find a friend. It's whether or not the rest of the town has the use of that land and how they feel during a time of the year when the ticks aren't as active because it's below 50 degrees in November usually. So, and it's a lovely time of year to be in the woods with your kids. And if people don't feel safe doing it, they don't feel safe doing it, but they have a right to be heard too, just as much as the 9 hunters who still could go hunting someplace else. I'm also concerned about the process that happened here. I witnessed so much derogatory language against different parties. There was nobody who was not gung-ho for hunting who was on any of the committees. It was so disturbing. And if it hadn't been, I don't think that we would be here now trying to do this. If the Board of Selectmen had kept the trust of the townspeople, we wouldn't be here. But they didn't, and they lost it. So the people got together and said, we need to do something about this. We were promised it would come back to town meeting, and it didn't. So they want to make sure it does. That's all I have to say.
You do need to be recognized by me to even have... I gave people a warning to get to the microphone, and so we'll allow them to speak. Those who have spoken before, you're going to be limited to 1 minute. If you haven't spoken before, you'll get your 3 minutes. So, sir, you get 1 minute.
Thank you.
Microphone 5.
I think the Board of Selectmen has exceeded its authority, but not unkindly, only because we have an ambiguous law, a bylaw. That bylaw, like explosives, was made, no explosives and no hunting. That bylaw was made on an exceptional basis, on a case-by-case basis. Okay, it's not a blanket law about hunting. It's a case-by-case emergency or something like explosives. But they have taken it that it's their power to dictate it to the whole town. This is a town vote. We're not trying to stop hunting. We're not talking even about deer or Lyme disease. We're strictly trying to say that a vote of this magnitude should be a town vote, and we should help the BOS understand that they can deal with the exceptions, but not the overview. This town is a no hunting overview.
You have 10 seconds.
And I like to keep to that. The bylaw just returns that authority to the people, so it's not confusing anymore. It's not a BOS decision. It's a town-wide decision, independently.
Okay, thank you. Back to microphone 2, please.
Judy Asserkoff, 362 River Road. When the Deer Committee first started to gather, a whole bunch of us would go and listen. I was not against the hunt at that time. I'm a wildlife person. I understand a lot of the complex issues regarding it. However, every single recommendation, thought, worry I expressed at those meetings were completely ignored. Okay, it was a pilot. I've started pilots in my job. Pilots are starting slow and then building big. And I understand that many people believe that picking 5 conservation areas was starting slow, but I think people were nervous, okay? The perceived worry made many of us, including myself, concerned. So when I recommended different hours or sharing days, hunters on some days, trail people on other days, just the idea of compromise there was zero response. So no matter where this vote goes, I hope that we all start in the boards and the committees, okay, to have more of a form of compromise and thought about how different people feel within this town. Thank you.
Thank you. At microphone 4.
Jonathan Supnick, 284 Acton Street. There's been a lot of talk about how safe bow hunting is, but the bylaw that we are amending allows all kinds of hunting, bow or firearms. So I propose that we amend the change that we're making to just ban firearm hunting, because it seems like there's general consensus that bow hunting's a lot safer, and maybe that'd make this a lot less contentious.
We need amendments in writing. Microphone 5, you have 1 minute.
Okay.
Don Allen, Pilgrim Path. A lot of the discussion that I'm hearing is focusing on the problems that deer can and do create. But it feels as if the focus wanders when it comes to the solution. A hunt of the size that the pilot of the size of the pilot hunt in 2018, for all of the reasons that we gave in the presentation, is not going to make much of a dent in our deer problem. And also, I remind you that deer respond to this sort of thing by increasing their reproduction rate. So in order to really deal with this problem, we would have to greatly expand the hunt on town land. Is this what we want in Carlisle?
Thank you. So we've now, all the people who were standing at the time that I warned about calling the question, I would just note that all those people have already spoken. I'll continue to recognize people who approach the microphone. Sir, at microphone 1.
Michael Ansara, 225 Lowell Street. Having heard much compelling argument on both sides, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to move that we call the question.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? So if this motion is passed, we then move to a vote on the article, and debate will be ended. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Motion carries by a majority, and I so declare. So we are now ready to move to a vote. This is the vote on Article 35. And I believe it has been amply explained, so I won't repeat anything. You know, I'm not going to call this on a voice vote, but just to give you the opportunity to exercise your lungs, go ahead. All those in favor, please signify by, actually, let me explain. Voting in favor is the adoption of this bylaw. Voting against would reject the bylaw, and we continue with the program as it exists today. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Nay. Okay, let's have a show. All those in favor, please lift your yellow cards. This is in favor of the bylaw. Okay. All those opposed, please lift your cards. I'd like to have a count. If we could have the tellers. I know you've stayed this long, so I'm sure, I hope you'll be okay a few more minutes.
She already got us. Can I have that?
So we'll have the same procedures. As soon as the tellers are ready, I'll ask those voting in favor to lift your cards. When the tellers go like this, you can put your hands down. Tellers, are we ready? Okay, all those in favor of the bylaw?
bacon one to it.
Okay, I've been bribed.
Okay.
Are we ready for the nays? Okay, those opposed?
We've already been counted, guys.
Mary, does someone have the stage?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, thank you. I encourage you, people not to leave until we have the vote announced. So while the tellers are tallying the vote, let me just take this opportunity to advance some closing remarks. First of all, a reminder, we still do have a town election next Tuesday. Always important for folks to come out. Not only are we electing various town officials, but we do have some ballot questions. The marijuana bylaws will still be on the ballot, but they were not approved last night. You do have the debt exclusion on the police station, which does still need to be voted on as well. I thank all of you for your extraordinary patience and resilience in coming out on this third night. It is deeply appreciated. Also, great thanks to the count that I don't know how many volunteers we have on the various boards and committees who put in an extraordinary amount of time in doing all the preparations that get us here. Town meeting is not just 1 or 2 or 3 nights. It really is 9 or 10 months work on the part of town employees and all the volunteers. I would also, she's going to kill me for this, but I would like to recognize Carolyn Luby, who for many years has been very ably doing the visuals for us and working with all the speakers. Done an outstanding job for many, many years, and this will be her last show. So thank you, Carolyn. Okay, and you're ready for the vote. The total is 80 in favor, 132 opposed. It fails to obtain a majority, and therefore motion does not pass, and I so declare. Is there a motion to adjourn the 2019 town? I'm sorry. Wait a second. No, it isn't actually. Motion to adjourn the meeting to be resumed 7 a.m. next Tuesday at the town election.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, vote with your feet. Thank you.